Hello there. It has been a long time since I have done an update. It was actually last summer. The last time I came to you to talk about the book I'm writing, and we are getting down to it. The deadline is quick approaching, and that is early April for the book to not only be done, but out. Available. It is going to debut at the Haunted Galena Paranormal Conference. It's a place I speak at frequently. And it's also just one of the best conferences that there are, just full stop. Check out hauntedgalena.com. If you haven't been there, just in general, it's a fun conference. And the town of Galena is amazing. The speakers they get, outside of myself, are fantastic, and they just make it a really fun party. And there's a lot of haunted locations to investigate while you're there. If you've always wanted to be on an investigation but don't have all that expensive gear, they got you hooked up. So those things usually sell out. So definitely check out the website, see what's available. And it takes place in a haunted hotel. What more can you ask for? So where am I at with the book right now? I am deep into writing. I was feeling very, very confident about where I was on the timeline. I never actually did something that I really meant to do and I knew I should have done, which is create these benchmark deadline times. Like, be done with the book, done with the first draft by this point, done with the final draft by this point, start layout, finish layout, send it to the printers. I never identified those dates, and I really feel like I should have, but part of it is I need the experience to do it, to be accurate with that. So when I start the next book, I'll have a lot more knowledge about how to do that accurately. I still should have tried, but I just didn't. I'm at 50 some thousand words in right now. And that's been a difficult thing to figure out how long to go. Now, my last book, which was 2008, so it was a while ago. I'm still very proud of this book. I love this book. I'm really happy with how it came out. This was 90 some thousand words. And it's over 300 pages. It's a lot. It's more than I want this book to be. I want it to be a bit more, my next book to be a bit more approachable. It's also going to be a series. So I know, based on what my outline looks like, I wouldn't be surprised if I end up in the 60,000 world, 62, 65,000 words. Not exactly sure. Still a lot. And I do want to have photos in it and stuff like that. So it's going to add some pages. And obviously I'm going to have to come up with the price point and things like that. Overall, I guess I'm blending a lot of different topics that I want to talk about, because I just did a book signing in Chicago, and I was talking with some other authors down there, and who also are doing the self-publishing route. I talked about this in my last video last summer, that I previously had a publisher. That book I was just showing, it went through a publisher, which was great because they had distribution to all of these different bookstores. Many of those, the vast majority of those bookstores, don't exist anymore. So I don't really need to go through a publisher anymore. I've had other issues with publishers in the past, and I just want to avoid all of that. So there's all of these different print on demand options, which is also what I want, because my first book, I went through a self-publisher, but then you have to buy 500 books at a time. You got to have this big quantity that you put a lot of money out for, and then you got to store it and yada, yada. The print on demand route seems like the way to go. It's definitely something I'm going to try out for this book. Maybe I'll stick with it. Maybe I won't. But for one, I've heard just from this past weekend that your shipping times could be unpredictable. When you actually do need to buy books for yourself, maybe they'll come in a week, maybe they'll come in a month. And this is even going through Amazon. So like the biggest whatever, even they can't give you reliable ship times, which makes me nervous for the conference. I want to make sure my books are available and in my hand at the beginning of April. And of course, I want to do a test print before I get to the bigger order, which really moves up my deadlines. The layout, everything has to be done at least a month earlier than I was expecting. And it's February and we're talking about April. So that means I've got no effing time at all to do all this. So I really have to binge hard on just focusing. Then also, and this is the more disturbing thing to me, even more disturbing than that, is that your quality might not be the same. You order a test print and it comes out a certain way, or even just, ordering and then ordering the next batch, the quality might not be the same, which that's very unsettling to me. You would assume that any printer, once you get it all fine-tuned, it's going to be good to go. That's not the case, apparently. So this is something that I will continue to talk about as I go through this. I guess it's worth noting also at this point that as I'm trying to cut down on side projects, I launched a channel that is about creativity and inspiration. And I'll get into the weeds on creating the book. A lot of that stuff over on that other channel. I'll put a link to it in the description of this video. But absolutely, if anybody out there has had recent self-publishing experience going through Barnes and Noble, Ingram, Amazon print on demand, pro tips, there's a lot of great YouTube channels out there for that. And I'm trying to check some of those out as well. But if any of you directly have experience and tips to share, I am certainly all ears. On the topic of this book, and if you haven't watched the previous videos, the book is about my life as a storyteller. I'm not one that really loves to talk about myself. However, I've had a lot of really great experiences, both in going out and visiting haunted locations and having fun adventures in that world, but also working in the space of creativity, working on film sets, creating my own projects, whether they're books or movies or shorter videos, podcasts, so on and so on, radio shows. And of course, the paranormal and creativity have gone hand in hand in my life. And so that's largely what it's about, lessons learned on sets and whatnot. And those sets often were haunted. So it's really cool that I get to kind of, check both of those boxes at the same time for much of my life. So in a sense, it is a memoir, which I hadn't really thought of it in that context. Even just doing my outline, which again, previous videos talked about it, it's very extensive and in depth. And you really have to kind of become an archaeologist in your own life to rebuild, reassemble, like, how did this happen? When did this happen? What year was it? Oh, this was before I did that. I thought it was after, things like that. And you really have to, when you're writing a memoir, as I'm learning, you really have to try to plant yourself in that space. And it really helps for me to listen to music I would have been listening to back then. Surround yourself with that time of your life, which nostalgia is a weird thing. And I don't love it, to be honest with you, because it's very easy to get sucked into it, especially because I've had a very positive life. As I said, I've had a life full of adventures and meeting fun people and hanging out with, getting to know great collaborators and whatnot, people that are still in my life to some degree, but maybe not to the same degree. People that were once roommates and now live on the other side of the country, things like that. People that I miss, quite frankly. Living in that space, it's sad sometimes. I think I saw a video kind of recently that nostalgia is wanting for something that's impossible. It's wanting for the past to be present. And I totally get that, because I absolutely, when I first moved out to LA and I was living with so many of my best friends and people that, they weren't best friends yet, but they became best friends. Actually, so many of my different roommates are best friend type people that are very important to me. And yeah, some of them I barely talk to anymore. And that sucks. It's a bummer. It's life though, so I try to never forget my past, of course, because there's nothing worth trying to forget. But, I try to keep my mindset, my attitude looking forward. But this book is forcing me to go against that and look backwards. And it's wild. Sometimes the synapses that connect, and you think about something that you haven't thought about in years, and it just kind of comes out of the ether when you're least expecting it. And it's just maybe a little detail. It's not something that will go into the book at all, but it's just so wild how the mind works. A memory that was way, way, way down there, and like, oh yeah, that presented itself for some reason right now. And actually, to be honest with you, on that note, that's something I'm going with a lot with this book. As a creator, as a storyteller, everything that my life has been leads to what my voice is today. So I'm trying to not filter out like, oh, that part isn't important. If it's interesting, it's in the book. If it's not interesting, if it's only interesting to me, and that can be tough to judge a little bit, then that goes to the cutting room floor. And I've certainly gone down some rabbit holes, written a number of paragraphs, and then thought, who is this for? Who would find this interesting other than me enjoying writing about it right now? And I've deleted it. But I'm trying to not put a filter on too many things, because so many parts of our lives from the deep past are more relevant or important to us today than we might know. And I'm trying to just let that be. And I can always delete stuff in the future, but for now, I'm just kind of trying to encourage it to all come out. But yeah, it is very common for me right now to have a dream that is my life 20 years ago. And then I wake up to this like momentary disappointment that like, oh man, that awesome time is not now. But then very quickly I'm reminded of how good life is now and all the great things in my life now that I didn't have, that couldn't have dreamt of long ago. But so it's weird. I just want to share this again as a creator in case there's other creators watching. And as I said, I started a channel on YouTube that is an old account that I hadn't used in a long time, and I'm using it for creativity and inspiration. I'm not going to be putting a lot on there because I really need to focus on the book, but I do want to have a weekly positive thought that I share in there. It could be a, again, inspiration, a lesson learned, that kind of a thing. I really think it's important to put positivity out into the world and try to inspire and encourage others to pursue their dreams. So it's a little bit of what I'm doing. Just about everything else I am tabling for the moment. As you've seen, if you are a regular viewer, I haven't been doing my positively paranormal videos. I will absolutely get back to those. I love doing those, but I just don't have the time for it now. Also, I've realized that I have all of these ideas for articles that I want to write for my website, whatsyourghoststory.com. And I really need to dedicate every moment of writing to writing this book. However, that doesn't mean I'm not going to update that page. I have been updating that site, but I'm going to do more that are kind of video bloggy. So if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll see them all, but I'll be posting them over on that page. I just won't be writing articles for the next couple of months over there. Also, the Fantastic Story Society is something that I love. I adore. I'm very proud with every episode that we've put out, and it's something I'm going to hit really hard this year. And I am forcing myself to wait till I'm done with my writing. 2023, I think we had a pretty big year. I don't remember the exact numbers on episodes that we released. 23 was a pretty big year. 24, we took a step back as far as how many episodes we did. But I want to go really hard this year and do a whole bunch. And I have a lot of great guests lined up. Max, Tim, and I do. But I'm going to force myself to wait on that for the time being. So that is going to come back. If anybody's looking forward to new episodes, we've got stuff already recorded even, but just haven't had the chance to edit it. It's going to come, but it's not going to come immediately. These videos I always do include some talking about ghost stories, and I'm going to be talking about Hollywood Forever Cemetery at the end of this video. So I'm just going to tease you along for the moment with that. A lesson that I've learned writing this book is to keep your momentum going. As you've seen, I have an outline of, okay, here's this topic, or here's this location with ghost story, and then the next one, then the next one, then the next one. It's very easy to write to the end of that story and feel like this is a great time to take a break, or I can retire for the night. I'll get back to it later. When you do that, there's a sense of finality. And there's also the sense of, oh, I have to start the next story from zero, from the blank page. And I've realized that I need to push myself a little bit harder to at least get the next paragraph or two started, even if it's the first sentence. But I know where I want to begin, how I want to begin. That way, it makes it a lot easier to come back to it the next day. But it can feel daunting when you know that you have to start to roll that boulder again from a dead stop. If you get a couple of sentences in, if you get a paragraph or two in, there's already some momentum that you're going to be walking back to. And that is a lesson I've learned on this one, and I'm definitely going to be carrying with me into any future writing. Okay, as promised, let's talk about Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Now, I've released a whole bunch of videos on Hollywood Forever Cemetery just within the last year. And I think I actually have another one or two recorded that I will edit. So I'm not going to go super into it, but I do want to bring it up because it is just one of my favorite places to bring people first and foremost. But it's also a place that I visit very frequently when I head out to Los Angeles because there's just so much to see. The place is always changing because sadly, we're always losing people. But the monuments that come in, I don't know, very exciting, very interesting, beautiful. And again, this is a place that is haunted. The place has ghost stories. And I feel like for as vast as it is, as many big personalities are here, there should be more ghost stories. Really, here's Santa Monica Boulevard. There's so much to talk about. Where do you even start? Because there's unique things in the huge communal mausoleums over here. There's the Cathedral Mausoleum over here, which is where famously Rudolph Valentino and June Mathis, who was his mentor and really an overlooked person in the history of Hollywood, one of the first female executives and the first female executive of, I believe it was MGM, really an important person, June Mathis. She and Rudolph Valentino are buried next to each other. He was in a crypt originally purchased for June's husband, but they divorced and the spot became available. They needed a temporary place to put Valentino, but he's still there. So it's not very temporary anymore. And again, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of just taking you on a tour, even though it's so easy to do. It's so fun to do. Importantly, for the ghost stories, and this is my favorite ghost story of the area. I'm going to plant myself here and hopefully we can get a good look. Yeah, all of these buildings back here, that is Paramount Studios. Oh, wow. Great. You can see the Paramount water tower looming over the cemetery. All of Paramount Pictures. Let's back it up. The all of this area was at one point cemetery land, and then they sold off an unused portion and sold it to Paramount. And then even up here, this is a strip mall. These are strip malls. This was all cemetery property as well. This is still cemetery property right here. These are big communal mausoleums, but these strip malls were also built on cemetery property. As a previous owner was selling off portions to make ends meet, he was not a good custodian of the cemetery. Don't worry, he is not the owner anymore. He's actually passed away and interred on the property as well. So pointing out that Paramount is on old cemetery property, there are a lot of ghost stories associated with the sound stages back here towards the back of Paramount. You see, I've never actually tried to drop the little Google man into Paramount before. Okay, so you can actually poke around in some of their buildings. I used to work actually right here. There's a theater here I used to do some press events at. So I don't know. Paramount is just a beautiful old place. I'm on a tangent as I tend to be, but anytime I talk Hollywood stuff, it's tough to focus. 1899 is when the cemetery opened. It was Hollywood Memorial Park, I believe was the first name of it. And of course, in addition to these huge names, people like Judy Garland, as you see Mickey Rooney here, he was one of the last, if not the last surviving actor who appeared in a silent film, in which he was a young child in there and he lived to old age. Cecil B. DeMille. There's just so many people, so many iconic, famous people. But in addition to them, there's plenty of people that you have never heard of that worked in film that are buried here. People witness other people of wearing different era clothing walking towards this portion of the cemetery towards the Paramount lot. Gothic and dark and kind of creepy looking. As you see, better shots here, just these old metal buildings. But the sound stages there are haunted. People see people walking through the area in era clothing, different clothing from different eras, and then walking through these buildings, through the walls into the studios. So I always wonder, are they people that are still returning to work? Or what I would hope, what I would want to be able to do if I were in their place is just pop in, see what's going on, see what's shooting, what's the new technology, how are they making movies these days? There's not really any ghost stories associated with Valentino, which I think is awesome because he's haunting about a dozen other places, at least a dozen other places. He was a guy that was at the height of his popularity and struck down relatively, definitely very young. He was 31 years old when he had an ailment that one thing led to another complication wise, and he passed away way too young. And I love that he's not seen here. He's seen at places with nightlife, places that he would want to go and hang out and party at. Also, of course, this was not his ideal burial location. It was supposed to be a temporary crypt, so he never really got the burial that he would have wanted. So I'm not saying he's not at peace, but he's finding his own fun in his afterlife. And depending on the age of this video, nope. So this is from 2015. So this is going to be too old for what I wanted to show, but very close to here is where Burt Reynolds is buried, and he's got a statue that has become my favorite statue to visit. And in front of him, between Burt Reynolds and the pond, is where Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman, is buried. And I have not yet visited Pee Wee's grave, but I certainly will soon. Let's see if we can at least zoom in and get a shot. Burt Reynolds right here. I really do love this monument. So getting back to the ghost stories, because I do want to put a call out there if anybody has any additional ghost stories, because again, there are so many burials here since 1899. And for a long time, this location was in a terrible state until the current owners, the Cassidy family took it over. It was in such a state that the cemetery made more money by charging people to take their loved ones out of the cemetery. That was how they were making most of the money. Kind of unreal that it was in that terrible of a state. So anytime you get a cemetery that is just wasting away, not being maintained, it tends to stir up activity. Now, granted, things are very beautiful and peaceful here now, But you still do. I still wonder if anything, any negative residual energy may have remained from that time period. But also, there's just so many iconic people buried here, so many people walking around, possible witnesses to something paranormal happening. We don't have nearly as many stories as I feel this place should have. Marion Davies was the mistress to William Randolph Hearst. And of course, William Randolph Hearst has all sorts of scandal around him, especially when it comes to the death of Thomas Ince. I have a recent video you can check out for that. He passed away 10 years before Marion Davies did. So he was never able to come here in life, but he apparently comes here and mourns at her mausoleum. This is the Davies family under her maiden name. Not very far from Marion Davies's tomb, I believe it's right here, is the grave of Virginia Rapet. She tragically died during a party in San Francisco at a time that, America was still observing, more or less in some ways, observing prohibition. This was a wild party that definitely had all sorts of debauchery going on. She dies at this party. She suffers some internal injuries. Exactly what happened will never be known, sadly. However, the allegations that come out is that she was assaulted by Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, and there was nothing to it. The only person that made these claims is somebody that had a history of blackmailing and extortion. So quite clearly, and Fatty Arbuckle at the time was the biggest star in Hollywood, so he was an absolute target. The case went to trial, even though there was really no evidence. There was a hung jury after hung jury, and then he finally was acquitted. But it was such a miscarriage of justice that it completely tarnished his name, ruined his name. He was not able to really find work again. He started to direct a little bit under a fake name because he could not find work. Theaters across America boycotted anything that he was associated with. So he was box office poison. He was, you can't, if you make a great movie, what good is it if no theater will show it? So he was in a very, very tough spot. This is something I recently found out that's in the book, is that he signed a contract to star in a movie for the first time in a long time. And he was so excited, and he went out to celebrate with some friends, and he ended up having a heart attack and dying. So right on the verge of actually making the comeback, he passes away. So he certainly didn't get justice. But then, because all the attention was focused on Fatty Arbuckle, nobody really pursued what happened to Virginia. So she passes away with no justice herself. She is buried next to the man that was her fiance at that time. Now, he lived quite a bit longer than she did, but clearly he always felt very attached to her. And he is actually observed mourning at her gravesite as well. So very sad story. So those are the three stories that I know about Hollywood Forever Cemetery as far as ghost stories are concerned. There's a billion other stories, but if you know of any other stories, and especially if you've ever experienced something yourself, I would love to hear about it, because again, I feel there's got to be more. One of the really cool things, and one of the reasons I love bringing people to Hollywood Forever Cemetery, is that, yeah, you start out going here like any other haunted cemetery with interesting gravestones and whatnot. You go to take the pictures and to visit the gravestones, hear the ghost stories, but soon it becomes more of a wildlife expedition, if you will. I mean, first off, you have this pond. The pond houses swans and ducks and turtles and fish. There are all of these cats who patrol the yard. One of the things I had heard was that they chose to bring cats in because they wanted to keep the rodent population down. I don't know if there's actually anything to that. I've read a great article recently about the people that take care of the cats there. And I think the reality is that they were just strays that were malnourished, not taken care of. And the cemetery allowed these other people to come in and neuter and spay the cats, but also provide for them. So they can wander the grounds in a much better life than your typical feral cat. But also, and I don't think we can actually drop our little Google guy there, but this red topped building here is a peacock enclosure. That's the shelter for them. They are free to roam the grounds, and you very commonly see them in this area over here. And then also, I couldn't believe how many I saw over here by these mausoleums. They've really taken over the place. There's over 50 peacocks. And There's a lot of different legends. I don't know if we'll ever really get down to the bottom of why are there peacocks here. One of the legends was that they're territorial, and if anybody sneaks in after dark, they'll chase them away. That I don't think there's anything to that, although I do think that's a funny visual of a peacock chasing someone, and that's a good idea for some AI created imagery that I might have to try out on my other channel. Everybody loves seeing a peacock. I don't know. That's what I found. I mean, they're really unique birds. You don't really get to see them up close very much in your day to day life. So I always found it really inspiring and cool that, we go in focusing on death and horror and ghost stories and tragedy. But the last experiences always at that cemetery are appreciating life, appreciating the wildlife around us. So that's my little update on the book and a little preview of what I've been writing about. Because, yes, Hollywood Forever Cemetery is part of the first book that will be coming out. And I don't know, thanks for taking the time. If you have any questions, comments, anything, always leave it in the comments. I do check the comments regularly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.